elementary talk called Rosicrucian Exercises in the Development of the Mind. And by Rosicrucian, I don't mean that the exercises were originated by the Rosicrucians, though in some circumstances they were. And, all right, I think we're all ready to start talking about all of these things. This is part of a whole series of talks that I'm putting together on basic things out of the Cosmology conception. And it takes about 4 years to get through the whole Cosmology conception. I mean, literally giving a talk a week or something like that. And it's an enormous amount of work, so it is coming along slowly. Okay, so when you're dealing with Rosicrucianism, you start out with Plato, right? Plato had very interesting ideas. He had an idea that there was a state that was called exercise and a state that was called tiring. That exercise was one state, and if you carried it too far, it became tiring. I think there's a really good point in there that can be taken that can be taken very well. The purpose of exercise is to increase function. Like if you're practicing piano, you do exercises to develop your fingering and your technique so that when it comes to playing the music, you can play the music better. The same thing with stretching exercises for athletic work or something like that. The same thing is true for spiritual exercises. They are the things that cause a change of state, and that change of state helps us to function better. And as I see it, there is something like, are any of you familiar with electronics? In electronics, signals, electrical signals are shown on an oscilloscope. They're given a graphic representation such that things go along like this, and then there's a spike, and there's a change of state. Then things go way down, spike down, and they go like this. And that's if it's a good circuit anyway, a good component. The two states that are plateaus, or that are parallels, this is going forward in time. What is it? T0, Tn or something like that. The lower plateaus are rest. The higher plateaus are daily function. And the peaks, high and low, are exercises. So that if you begin your day with an exercise that raises you to a peak level, it brings you to a higher state than if you hadn't done that exercise. And if you do retrospection at night before going to sleep, it takes you deeper into rest more quickly than if you hadn't done the exercise. So exercises represent means of development so that you can function better and so that you can rest better and accomplish those things in life. All right, it's all fairly simple. The whole of this is not always on a level. It's a trend, because gradually our exercises should be raising our consciousness more all the time. Now we want to talk about one word in here, and that is this word. Mind. And from a Rosicrucian point of view, mind does not mean brain. The brain is an organism in the physical body that is used for the transmission of thought into the material world. It is a nervous part of the nervous system, a specialized part of the nervous system. Mind is what does the thinking. mind lives in a totally different world altogether, where the laws of physics and chemistry don't apply. But the laws of the world of mind stuff apply. And so it's something totally different. So we have to talk a little bit about the mind, because the mind is both creative and it's transmittive. In the Rosicrucian point of view, the mind is the centralmost part of all our evolution, all of our being. If we remember, the whole mind itself, or the whole creation, lived in the mind of God before the creation began. Everything that we have in our spiritual physiology began in the mind. Our physical body was first made out of mind stuff. Our etheric vital bodies were first made out of mind stuff. Even our desire bodies were made out of mind stuff. The mind is the central vehicle for bringing things into creation. It is also where everything collapses into as the universe collapses in the evolutionary half of the whole creative plan. In involution, everything is focused into existence in the material world through the mind, and in the evolutionary sense, everything is absorbed back into the spirit through the mind. And so the extension and the collapse of the cosmos are all facilitated through the mind. All the bodies collapse into the mind. All of the soul material collapses into the mind. And I'm assuming that everybody's familiar with these terms. This is really just a simple review kind of talk. So let's use a classic diagram of geometric figures in progression to indicate the place of the mind in evolution. It's sort of Pythagorean. Pythagoreans and the Platonists based everything on point, line, and circle. And in the beginning there was just this focus. There was this point. And out of this point there was an extension. And this extension was a line of consciousness. Obviously this point is the focus of the mind. And on both sides of the mind, there were other foci, one being the focus of matter, one being the focus of spirit. As the evolution progressed, as we went through the plant-like and animal-like stages, the universal spirit began to dip closer to the horizon of consciousness, the delineation of consciousness, and the material worlds began to rise up higher in consciousness. In evolution, there are these two processes going on, at least two processes. One is the spirit becomes materialized. That is, the creative part of our being expresses itself in material forms. And it knows itself through its own creations. A lot of people have been talking about how they write in their journals, and when they write things, they crystallize what they know. I've heard several people say that today. Another process is the spiritualization of matter. That is, matter is a crystallization of ignorance out of the absolute, out of the unknown. And so spirit projects itself into matter, and as the spirit evolves, its forms become more and more complex. They become more and more refined, so that it's easy to see that the organism of a human being, which can express so many things in a smile, it can express about 5 different changes of moods in a fraction of a second, is very much different than the expression of spirit through a euglena or a chelant or something like that, where it's a single-celled animal. So that the spirit becomes materialized, but we don't often realize that matter itself, from the intelligence of spirit, becomes more and more known. And so there's a continuous interaction of spirit with matter. Then we reach the point where we are human. Things have drawn together so that the spirit can focus itself directly into matter, and it can take experiences out of the material world and draw them back into the spiritual consciousness. Then, as things proceed, as soul material, the spirit projects itself through matter, and matter projects itself through the focus of mind into the spirit. And gradually the two become fused together. And this carries on until they've passed all the way through each other, and we have what is called the diamond state of the perfected soul body, where a human has gone well to being a demigod, and matter has been completely spiritualized, and spirit has become completely materialized, and all the creative potentials are there. But the funny thing is as this is happening, this is actually shrinking until it all shrinks really basically back to a point, because things are collapsing, things are going back into the spirit. And so we have an evolution from a point to a point. These are all very symbolical kinds of mathematics. And in all of these things, the mind is the central focus. It is the tool that the spirit uses to project into matter, and it is the means whereby matter is taken, the experiences that we have are taken back into the spirit. Okay? It's the central focus of being. In fact, one of the purposes, the Rosicrucians teach in the intermediate philosophy classes, that there are three purposes for our existence: the development of soul power, the development of character through experience, and the development of a creative mind. And so what we're doing in this whole evolution is finding a way to love and to create. And almost all of that work is done through the mind. So things collapse back into the black hole, and we have that whole picture of it. All of our selfhood, this is the center of selfhood. All of our center of selfhood is focused on the mind. You might say that in the symbol of the sun, that is the point in the circle without the line. The point is the central focus of mind, which becomes synonymous with the focus of the Virgin Spirit. In fact, the seed atom of the mind, if we want technical terms, the seed atom of the mind is sort of located in the same area that the silent watcher, that the Virgin Spirit, a silent watcher, has focused in the brain or in the head. It's back behind the frontal sinus. If you're not familiar with these terms, they're not really that important. They're technical, but they're not important. I'm just putting that out. I'm trying to talk to several different audiences at the same time. Some people are familiar with this. Some people are not familiar with this. A peculiar thing about the mind is that the mind is perfected through use. That by using our mind, it becomes stronger, it becomes sharper, it becomes clearer. These are things that we have to remember. It's that way with almost all of the bodies, but especially with the mind, it is important because there are some illusions that we slip into with regard to the physical plane. the physical, in the chemical region and the etheric region, we do get tired. And there are a lot of limits to the physical body, and it is wise to pace ourselves, unless you have to be an absolute fanatic like I am. You have to learn to pace yourself. I don't know, I may have taken years off of my life by acting crazy, but you have to pace yourself if you're going to tire out. You're never going to be able to complete all the things that you could in life. Not so with the mind. The mind does not tire out. It gets sharper and stronger and clearer the more we use it. In fact, all of our self-knowing comes through thinking. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit. Now, when we're talking about this is not quite an accurate drawing, even as a symbolic drawing. Sort of as if we take the hourglass, what we should do is, to use a physics analog, we should call this a lens and mirror. So it has a reflective capability and it has a projective capability. Lenses are used for projecting, mirrors are used for reflecting. And this line, everything, the higher part of the mind is called the ideational mind, or the abstract mind, but that word doesn't mean now what it used to mean in the times when Heindel was writing. Abstraction has taken on a different meaning. And this is the concrete mind. And the higher self is associated with the ideational mind, and the lower self is associated with the concrete mind and the higher part of the desire body. And we have the desire body, the etheric body, the physical body. This is the higher mind, life spirit, and divine spirit. The human spirit is the same thing as the ideational mind. Okay, we should look at, when we're talking about mind, we should look at what happens in our own psychology, because there are all different kinds of things that we do that come under the name of thinking that are really not thinking. First of all, there are automatic responses, and most people function most of the time on the level of automatic responses. That is, using the lower mind as a reflectant. We take on certain assumptions, we're educated into them, we're schooled into them, and they are part of the lower nature. And the lower nature, even though it is a very great resistance to our spiritual growth now, the lower nature has a very valuable function, and it has had for almost all of our evolution since we have become, or even in the dawning of our self-consciousness. The lower nature has been our vehicle of instinct. It takes care of us until the spirit can enter in, until we can be strong on our own. So there are automatic thoughts. Something happens out here, something threatens us, we reflect. And the instinctual mind takes care of it and acts automatically. There's no deliberation, no spiritual pondering about the meaning of all of this. It's just a quick and simple reflection out of the external world. Then coming in this way from the phenomenal worlds, things are taken into the spirit when the mind is used as a lens any time we remember an experience in the external world. By remembering and focusing our mind, we take an external experience and we get the feel of it, we understand the meaning of it, and we take it in as part of us. Okay. Looking from the other side, when the spirit conceives something that it never even forms a concrete thought, that is called Immaculate Conception. It's a very high state. The Neoplatonists talk about that a lot, and the Buddhists talk a lot about that. They don't even like dealing with the phenomenal worlds at all. All their transmutations and all the things they work on, they stay completely in the transcendental realms because they feel that that's clean or that's pure. And the final function is when we take something from the transcendental worlds and use the mind as a lens, it's a creative activity. We conceive of an idea or we conceive of a project in the spirit. We have this intuitive impulse. We focus it through the mind and out into the world as far as we can project it. And so then there would be a whole complete cycle is if we willed something into existence, it would come as an intuitive experience, come through the mind, and we would have some kind of event in life. And then from that event, we would remember it, and we would draw it back through the mind and into the spirit as soul food. And the spirit would be stronger, and it would have more the flavor of the experiences it had. And we know that the focus of the spirit, it's really interesting the way this works, because from the transcendental point of view, it's very different than from the phenomenal point of view. From the transcendental point of view, everything is thick. Everything is full with spirit. This is why Christ is called the rock. Because consciousness is like completely contiguous. It's like one solid. So how do you create in that? It's really interesting. If you create, I don't know if you've noticed it in your spiritual exercises, and I'm not going to poke around, but when you concentrate, when you focus, you're asking a question. And as you ask a question, the attitude of asking a question causes something like an illusion in the fullness of the spirit that is like a whirlpool. It's a vacuous whirlpool. And into that whirlpool, the concrete matter is drawn, because this is a vacuous kind of whirlpool. And these can take all kinds of geometric shapes, and they're called archetypes. So from the Rosicrucian point of view, thinking is the process of creating a vacuum, a controlled vacuum, which gets filled up with phenomenal matter, which is not as dense in complete contiguity as the spiritual realms are. Therefore, when somebody tells you that you've got a vacuum between your ears, that's a really excellent compliment. Somebody tells you that, you can say, hey, I'm glad that you think so much of me like that. And so that's what the process of thinking is like. Everybody's tired, so I should really whip through this fast. Everybody looks like they're about to fall on the chairs horizontally. Well, we're almost halfway through already here. Okay, so when we're talking about spiritual exercises that work with the mind, we're going to be talking about a certain kind of Rosicrucian exercise. There are a number of Rosicrucian exercises, but we're going to only talk about one, and we'll talk about several categories of that one. The whole idea of exercises, according to the Rosicrucian teaching, is that the Rosicrucian exercises, even the beginning Rosicrucian exercises, are advanced exercises. Because the simple Rosicrucian exercises are based on rudiments. They're based on fundamentals. And being that They're based on the foundations of everything of the entire cosmos. And if we master these rudimentary things, we have mastered the basis of everything in the cosmos. The Rosicrucian exercises are initiation. They are based on the principles that create the universe, that sustain the universe, that modify the universe, and that dissolve the universe. All of the cosmos is based on the same principles that the Rosicrucian exercises are based on. Yes, there may be some special, if you're a little bit deviant, as all of us are, at least a little bit deviant, from the evolutionary standard, there may be some special exercise to bring you back to some kind of normal state. But exercises and initiation and spirituality aren't supposed to make us different from the cosmos. They're supposed to put us right at the heart of the cosmos. They're supposed to align us with the whole evolutionary plan, with the whole creative work. And therefore they're not stand out, they are part of it. And this is why great labors are made in the Rosicrucian Cosmological Conception to talk about cosmology. I have a whole bunch of tapes on cosmology if people are interested in them. It's enough to break the bank. But the exercises that the Rosicrucians give are based on the same things that have made the universe. And the idea is that since we are microcosms of the universe, we have in us the same thing that the universe does. And if God's plan is working through the cosmos, God's plan is working through us in the same way. And so we don't have to stand on our head and whistle and shake our left hand or anything like that. That's not really important. For some people it might be important to do something like that just because they're especially wigged out or something. But for most people, it is to attune ourselves and work with the whole plan. All right. I think I've stressed that plenty strongly enough. There are three basic types of Rosicrucian exercises. They have to do with kinds of rotation. One, there are forward moving. Two, there are backward moving. Three, there are, how would you say it? I don't want to use the word constant. I don't want to use the word perpetual. No. Eternal. Something like constant and eternal. We're only going to talk about one of these, but I'll just mention them. The forward-moving exercises are done at the beginning of the day. And what we do, we realize that all new impulses, because everything comes from the Spirit within and works its way out into the world, we go right back to the very beginning of the whole business. The whole business, not just the solar cosmos. We go right back to in the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by it, and without it was not anything made that was made. In it was life, and the life was the light of ones. And the light shined in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. Whenever we're going to put something new in evolution, we don't add, it's not like adding a piece on a house. Everything is within everything else. And therefore, when we start each day fresh, we start in the morning and we begin ab initio, right from the beginning, and we go out into the world. This brings us smoothly into our bodies and carries us with us as much as we can of the spiritual worlds and brings us physically into the world. The backward moving exercises, we know that in the second half of evolution, as well as going forward and completing our spiritual work, we're passing through matter and we're withdrawing back into the spiritual worlds, and we're doing this as a voluntary act of love. In the first half, the involutionary half, we were creatures and we were takers. And this is why Christ, who inaugurated the whole second half of evolution, said, it is better to give than to receive. He didn't mean to say that we should break up the balance of destiny, of cause and consequence, by only being givers, but he was saying that he was talking about a whole new evolutionary impulse. Everything we are now, we're takers. It was built into us by the gods. Now we not only put the influence of the gods out of us, but we do it in such a way that we give. And part of that giving is digesting everything that is in us. And we digest everything that is in us by memory. And when we remember things, we eat them up. And then they become part of us as soul material taken into the spirit. And therefore, you realize, we'll talk about things like hypnosis, that a wheel, when they try to take you out of your body with hypnosis, they count backwards. And when they try to bring you back in, they count forwards. Because there's something about following, to plan your tomorrow when you're going to sleep at night is one of the worst things you can do. Because it grinds you into the body and then you can't be released from the body. But it's also our bane that when we go backwards, when we voluntarily look at the day in reverse order, puts us to sleep right away, because it's a real voluntary act of love to do it, because it unscrews us from the physical body and boom, we're out just like that. And then they have the constant internal exercises, which is prayer. Ceaseless prayer. And that is to say that this is what makes the law of analogy work, is because God is never lost. God is permanently here on every level of existence, as above, so below, is based on the unity of God, that things can go to any different plane, and the oneness of the divine is recreated on each level of being. I want to talk about one variation of forward-moving exercises. We're almost done. I want to talk about one variation, what would be called a concentration series of exercises.
That's forward moving, that's backward moving.
Concentration is forward moving. It actually works with all of them, but I think it's the best one to begin with. With concentration, one is able to bring the general power of will of the Spirit to bear on the mind and on the personality, all of the phenomenal bodies, to control them and to get the best use out of them. To think about meditation without concentration is rather purposeless, because concentration gives us a focus of attention, and with that focus of attention, then we can expand it. But we have to have something to expand first. We have to have one simple, clear thought. But we'll talk about it in relation to meditation and all of those things. I'm going to talk about the same series of exercises in 4 different planes. Because the beautiful thing about the Rosicrucian exercises is you can do them on many levels at the same time. You can be active in many kinds of work at the same time. All right. Let's take the simplest way possible, completely in the physical world. Completely in the physical world, concentration is called observation. We look at something, and it's an intentional looking to see what it is. Statement of reality. You can listen to tell what it is. You can touch to know what it is. You can look to know what it is. But what is where you have to begin with. Concentration leads then to the next step on the completely phenomenal realm. It leads to discrimination. When we know what is, then we can see how it differs from other things and how it functions. This is all completely on the physical plane. Then we can raise it to a level where we get the feel of what it's like. Because everything, whether it is a four-leaf clover or whether it is a rivet, everything has a feel about it. It has a beauty. It isn't just a physical form. It isn't just a physical design. It has a feel about it. It has a character about it. And finally, we can look at something and see what its function is. Understand what it means. We can look at a hemisphere and we can see that it's a bowl. First we see that it's a bowl, and then we see how it's different from a plate, and then we get to see the beauty of the bowl, and then we can take and see how that bowl can be used. That's one simple, very simple way of looking at the exercise. All right. We can do the same thing more deeply. We can observe. We begin at the same place. We can say, this object exists. That's what this is. But if we carry our observation more deeply, we can look into the object, and discrimination instead becomes an ability to see through the physical form, to see the life, the vitality, or the energy that holds it together. If it's an inanimate object, we can see an energy field holding it together. So that what I'm saying is that the Rosicrucian exercises on this level are leading to a simple clairvoyance. This simple clairvoyance is that first we see the physical, and then we see the energy behind it that holds it together, that causes it to move, whatever. If we observe an object even more deeply, we can go even antecedent to that, and we can see the motive for its existence. We can see what kind of feeling brought it into existence, or what kind of feelings it has. All of this by a simple kind of concentration. And finally, if we focus, we can go beyond the physical, beyond the etheric, beyond the desire world, where we get the feeling and motive, and we can penetrate the thought that is behind it. The meaning of it, the intent of it, we can penetrate by the same exercise. Okay, that's a second level of doing a very simple exercise. If you're doing it well, you can do it on all of these levels at the same time, because the first run through actually becomes a subset of the second run through. Now, if we're doing this really well, on a third level, this has profound effects in us. And for the most part, they are effects that will be taking place in the future. It's getting hot. Woke you up, huh?
Oh, I might fall asleep now because the lights are on.
Don't snore.
We left off at seeing the thought behind it. But if we are doing our exercises really well, they work on the mind itself, such that if we observe something and we observe only its form, and then begin to understand its life. In the first case, if we remember, the world of thought has, the concrete mind has 4 layers. The outermost is called the continental, where there are the thoughts behind every form. And that's where we are awake right now, at least partially awake right now. We understand, in our minds, we understand form. Well, if we, through clairvoyance and repeated exercise of our concentration, if we get to the point where we watch life and continue to watch life, we develop and wake up the next level, which is the oceanic region. And then we can think true to life. That is, literally, we can think in terms of life, creatively. That in the same way that we make automobiles right now, we make wristwatches, we make statues, we make all sorts of things like that, but they're all forms. Even if we make them out of wood, or even if we make them out of live plants, we're still dealing only with the form. But when we awaken the oceanic layer, then in our mind we think in terms of life. And that is to say that the mineral stuff, literally, if we're doing our exercises well, we're leading to the place, like there are microorganisms that live but just a few seconds. And those few seconds of existence are the sustained consciousness of a group spirit that is keeping them alive. Now that's motivation. When we get to this point, that we're thinking in terms of life, as long as we hold our concentration, that long will our forms live. So we'll actually be keeping something alive by keeping our attention focused. When we penetrate with clairvoyance to the desire world, where we see emotions, where we see feelings, where we see passions, where we see desires, eventually in that process we transcend. And we transcend to the aerial region. And then we can think in terms of emotions. Right now we barely emote, but then we will be able to create in terms of emotions. You recognize that in all of these exercises, or all of these renditions of the same exercise, there is one principle that is carried through again and again and again. That is the principle of transcendence. When we first observed, then we transcended to discrimination. And from discrimination, we transcended to getting the feel of beauty about it. And then we, on the second run through, we transcended between mere form and life and desire and thought. Now on the third run through, we transcend to the point where we can get right to the creative thoughts of form, the creative thoughts of life, the creative thoughts of desire, and then the final transcendence on this run through is a transcendence to thoughts about thoughts. The meaning of meaning, the question that is its own answer, and we transcend to the point that we can think completely creative thoughts, and we can then have raised something from a mineral state through a plant state, through a life state, through an animal state, to a liberated state that is human-like. The same process that we have been going through in evolution, we give back to the universe creatively. The same process uses the very techniques that the beginning exercises have. The simple little ways of our exercises with these cycles within cycles, the first run through was just a little epicycle on a greater cycle, and then that was another epicycle on a yet greater cycle, and this one was a yet greater one. It's always the same analogous technique that is being used. And we raise from one level to another by the actual performance of the exercise. Nobody has to tell you how to do the exercise. If you do it in the process, it's self-educational. When you concentrate and you see what's there, nobody has to tell you how to know that something is different from it. Nobody has to tell you how to discriminate that this is green and this is a little bit more blue-green. If you know what's there, you can do it on your own. See, because all of these spiritual exercises free us. They make us exceedingly self-reliant. We don't have to depend on any other being in the cosmos. We become a law and a power unto ourselves, and the whole process is right there. So let's run through it all one more time, because we've gotten now where we see that we can think in terms of creative potential, which is very awesome. And let's look at it one more time. We begin with concentration. Let's begin in our mind. We concentrate on producing a thought form. That is, any time we're thinking or holding our thought, especially if it's visual thought is a complete thought. Imageless thought is a little trickier, because imageless thought has only part. It doesn't have a form. It isn't fulfilled. So suppose we're doing the Rosicrucian exercise where we form an image in our consciousness. It doesn't have to be like an external image. In the process of doing that, in the process of thinking, creating a thought, what happens? We transcend. And we transcend. This is a very elementary exercise as well as a very advanced exercise. It happens a little bit all the time, each time we do the exercises. When we think, the more we put our attention into the thinking process, the more we transcend from concrete thinking into ideational thinking. We know who the thinker is. We get the idea. And the most basic idea is the idea of self. And therefore, concentration, when we know what is there by producing a thought form, then we can expand that thought form to a universal idea. And in that universal idea, we are then living in the realm of universal spirit. When we know self, we know God, because that's part of the idea of self, is God. And a concentration produces a thought form, which is complete. You see, we get our freedom through thinking. If we don't think, we don't become free. If the spirit does not take the trouble to complete its thoughts, producing archetypal thought forms, the spirit will never be freed. And when it's freed, when we've once concentrated and transcended, then we can meditate. We don't have to meditate. Meditation is the next logical step. And we can then see we then live in the human spirit. but we can even transcend that. And after we have the idea of knowing ourself, we can know selfness. That is, to put it in Christian parlance, we don't try to destroy the self. We try to give the self over to the selfness. And the selfness we know by the name Life Spirit, which is Christ. So even in a very elementary way, when we give our lives to Christ, in our exercises, what we are doing, that in watching ourselves, it says in the Rosicrucian Temple service, we shall know even as we are known. And when we're at that state, we are at the Christ consciousness of the Life Spirit, and we know then how individuals are known from the universal Spirit, where we are in a oneness. We can transcend even beyond that, and that conception of selfness, you might call it the universal self that belongs to everyone, but we can transcend that, and we can transcend to a realm where we see the will to be in everything. We can transcend to the realm of divine spirit, and we can be at one with the Father. Christ said He's going to take us to the Father. And literally the same exercise where we began looking at a stone or at a rivet or at a plant or something like that, we can take it where we can see the idea behind it, where we can see the life. They're called, on one stage, they're called concentration. And then when we get the seeing self and the universal idea, it's called meditation. And when you transcend beyond that, it's called contemplation. And when we are perceiving, because it's not just perceiving, because we actually become at one with it, with the divine, when we are with the unified oneness of everything, with the will to be. It is. That's called adoration. I can't say anything more after that. Nobody should. No clapping, anything like that. Rebecca's going to read for us.
Charity suffereth long and is kind. Charity envieth not. Charity vaunteth not itself, is not puffed up, doth not behave itself unseemingly, seeketh not her own, is not easily provoked, thinketh no evil, rejoiceth not in iniquity, but rejoiceth in the truth, beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, endureth all things. Charity never faileth, but whither there be prophecies, they shall fail. Whither there be tongues, they shall cease. Whither there be knowledge, it shall vanish away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect is come, then that which is in part shall be done away. When I was a child, I spake as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. For now we see through a glass darkly. but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know even also as I am known. And now abideth faith, hope, and charity, these three. But the greatest of these is charity.
Just give us a note.
Elbow.
And what?
Very nice, Rebecca.
Yes, very nice.
He made the law.